A single day in ancient Egypt begins at night. We travel back thousands of years, to the fertile banks of the Nile, to a civilization immortalized by towering pyramids, golden masks, and gods carved into stone. Ancient Egypt is often remembered as majestic and mysterious, a land of divine kings and eternal monuments. But beneath the polished imagery lies a far harsher truth. This was not a world designed for comfort. Ancient Egypt was a place where the sun ruled mercilessly, where survival demanded obedience, endurance, and faith, and where daily life unfolded under the constant gaze of gods who were believed to see every action, every thought, every mistake. The heat was relentless, the work was unforgiving, and nature showed little mercy tonight. We ask a simple question, one that sounds harmless, but isn't. What would really happen if you had to live just one ordinary day in ancient Egypt? Not as a pharaoh, not as a priest, not wrapped in linen and gold, but as an average person, because in this world, the sun isn't the only thing that will test you. Hunger, exhaustion, disease, hierarchy, and divine judgment are never far away. Every step you take is shaped by heat, sand, and belief, and by nightfall, simply being alive feels like an achievement. And before we begin, take a moment to settle in. If you enjoy these quiet journeys through history, feel free to support the channel by liking the video and subscribing, but only if this kind of storytelling truly speaks to you. And if you'd like, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Somewhere in the world, countless people are drifting into this story together now. Dim the lights, let the outside world fade, and step carefully into the ancient past. Waking under an unforgiving sun. Before we go any further, make yourself comfortable, maybe turn on a fan, just enough to create a low, steady hum in the background. Let the room cool, even slightly, because where you're about to wake up, relief is rare. Welcome to ancient Egypt, a land of pyramids, gods, sacred rituals, and relentless ultraviolet violence. Before you even open your eyes, the sun has already arrived. It doesn't rise gently, it invades. Light pours through the thin walls of your reed hut, piercing the darkness like a divine spotlight. The sky god Ra has no interest in subtlety. He is already at work. And you are already late. There are no curtains here, no shutters, no glass, certainly no air conditioning, just the raw desert sun pressing down, heating everything it touches, the walls, the floor, your skin. By the time morning truly begins, the heat has already settled in, heavy and unavoidable. You lie on a straw mat, placed directly on the packed earth. A linen sheet rests over you, light, breathable, and almost entirely symbolic. It offers the idea of comfort, not the reality. The famous Nile breeze you might have heard about in modern documentaries. It has vanished sometime around 2800 BC and never returned eventually. You sit up and the heat greets you like an accusation. By the time you step outside, the temperature is already climbing toward 90 degrees Fahrenheit, well over 30 Celsius, and it's not even mid-morning. The sun doesn't simply shine in ancient Egypt, it attacks. Your linen tunic absorbs the light instantly, doing nothing to shield you. It feels less like clothing and more like wearing tissue paper inside a sauna. And forget sunscreen. There's no aloe vera, no SPF. Not even a wide-brimmed tourist hat with a souvenir logo. Protective oils do exist, but they're reserved for the wealthy, the elite, or those who serve in temples. If you're an ordinary person, your options are limited. Some people smear mud on their skin, others use animal fat in desperate cases. Even crocodile dung is rumored to help reflect the sun's fury. Whether it works or not isn't clear. What is clear is that none of this feels reassuring. As the day crawls toward midday, the ground itself becomes hostile. Stone surfaces grow so hot they could cook lentils without a fire, and shade is precious. Trees are rare. You might press yourself against a mud brick wall, hoping for relief, only to discover the wall is radiating heat back at you, as if the earth itself is sweating you. Meanwhile, look and feel like something forgotten inside a clay oven, and you must not complain because in ancient Egypt, the sun is not just a weather condition, it is divine authority throughout. The sun god watches everything. The hotter the day, the more powerful he is believed to be. Enduring the heat isn't just survival, it's obedience. If you are suffering, it means the god is strong, and questioning that strength is not wise. So if you're melting under the sky, congratulations, spiritually speaking. It's a compliment. In short, surviving even the first hours of a single day in ancient Egypt requires hydration, humility, and an extraordinary tolerance for feeling like a slow-roasting piece of poultry beneath an angry god. And this is only the morning. The Nile, sacred lifeline, shared hazard, and this is still only the morning. You finally rise from your scratchy straw mat, muscles already warm before any real work has begun. There is good news. At least by ancient Egyptian standards, the Nile is close, very close. Life here exists because of it. The bad news: you can smell it before you see it. Yes, this is the mighty Nile, the heart of Egypt, the source of food, trade, fertility, and divine blessing. Entire dynasties rise and fall by its moods. Priests praise it, farmers pray to it, poets sing about it, and yet, standing on its banks, it smells suspiciously like a fish market that lost a fight with a swamp. The air buzzes with life, flies hover in thick clouds, frogs leap in and out of the shallows, creatures with too many legs scuttle along the mud. Something splashes nearby, and you very deliberately choose not to ask what it was. Still, this is where you bathe. The soap does not exist yet, and even if it did, it wouldn't be for you. Instead, you rely on the most advanced cleansing method of the ages: sand. You scoop it up and scrub your skin, grain by grain, performing exfoliation the ancient Egyptian way. It's rough, ineffective, and oddly humbling. Think of it as nature's sandpaper, minus the polish. So clothing is washed here too, if washed is the right word. Fabric is soaked, then beaten against rocks until either the dirt leaves or the cloth gives up entirely. All the while, you keep one cautious eye on the water, silently hoping that no crocodile mistakes your laundry for a convenient snack. And just to make the experience more enriching, there's the matter of what flows into the Nile from upstream: the sewage, animal waste, human waste, the occasional funeral boat drifting quietly past. This river is shared by people, livestock, rituals, and the dead. Cleanliness in this world is a flexible concept. You scrub, you rinse, you emerge feeling slightly less sticky than before and slightly more concerned about parasites. If you're lucky enough to live in a major city like Memphis or Thebes, there might be a public basin or cistern available, but for most people, it's Nile or nothing. And privacy, forget it. Bathing here is a public event. Families gather, neighbors chat, animals wander through, and ibis pecks at the mud near your ankles like it's on the payroll. Once the washing is done, water jars are filled and balanced carefully on heads or shoulders. They must be carried back quickly before the rising sun turns your mud brick home into a low-budget kiln. It's a daily ritual, essential, spiritual, exhausting, and quietly stressful. So yes, the Nile is sacred. It feeds the crops, it cleans the body, it quenches thirst and sustains life. But let's not romanticize it too much. In reality, the Nile is part miracle, part biohazard, and absolutely all you have. Breakfast, fuel, not pleasure. By now, you've bathed in a crocodile-infested river, scrubbed your skin with sand, and emerged only slightly cleaner than before. Your body already feels warm, dry, and vaguely exhausted, like a baked fig left too long in the sun. And yet, the day hasn't truly begun. It's time for breakfast. This is the most important meal of your ancient Egyptian day, and easily the least glamorous. Let's manage expectations early. There are no fruit bowls, No soft eggs, no honey-drizzled pastries, and absolutely no iced lattes. Breakfast here isn't about pleasure or choice, it's a tactical refueling operation, designed to keep your body moving for a few more hours under a merciless sun. You sit where you can, a low wooden stool if you're fortunate, the floor if you're not, and most people squat in corners or against walls, eating quickly before the heat grows worse. And at the center of every meal sits the same unchallenged king of Egyptian cuisine, bread. There is a lot of it. The bread is dense, coarse, and stubbornly chewy, the kind of food that makes your jaw work harder than your mind. It's made from emmer wheat or barley, ground between stone slabs, then baked in clay ovens that may or may not also serve as temporary housing for rats. No one asks questions, and don't be surprised if there's sand in your loaf. Not sprinkled on top, not added intentionally, just quietly present, having slipped in from the grinding stones and stayed there out of spite. Every bite carries a faint crunch, like the bread is reminding you where it came from. Think of it as a daily mineral supplement. You wash it down, you drink beer. But temper your enthusiasm. This is not crisp, cold, or refreshing. Ancient Egyptian beer is thick, cloudy, and lukewarm, a more liquid porridge than pint. It's brewed from partially baked bread, fermented just enough to keep it from actively killing you, and consumed in generous quantities. It's high in calories, it's vaguely sour, it tastes like survival. Even children drink it, not as a rebellious rite of passage, but because it's safer than water. The brewing process at least kills some parasites, and like the Nile, which remains a floating laboratory of biological ambition, if fortune smiles upon you, and it rarely does, you might get an onion or a handful of dried dates to go with your carb masterpiece. Protein appears only if someone caught a fish and didn't immediately eat it raw by the riverbank. As you chew your rock-like bread and sip your grain sludge, flies gather enthusiastically around you. To them, this is a feast. You swat at them with one hand, guard your cup with the other, and try not to dwell on the uncomfortable truth forming in your mind. This is probably the best meal you'll have all day. Breakfast in ancient Egypt isn't about flavor. It isn't about enjoyment, it's about function. It gives your body just enough energy to survive until the next time someone hands you another sand-infused brick of bread and tells you to keep working. And speaking of work, your day is only beginning. Work until the sun lets you stop. Upon appetite, you've swallowed your gritty bread, chased it with chunky beer, and allowed yourself just enough stillness to feel human again. That brief illusion doesn't last long, because now it's time to work, and ancient Egyptian labor makes modern burnout look like a luxury wellness retreat. Unless you're a scribe, a priest, or a member of the royal household, and let's be honest, you're not. Your job is built from 3 ingredients: muscle, dust, and endurance. There are no air-conditioned rooms, no coffee breaks, no ergonomic anything, just heat pressing down on your skull, sand clinging to your skin, and the constant awareness that collapsing before noon is not only possible, but unremarkable. If you're a farmer, your day begins ankle-deep in Nile mud. By sunrise, you're already pulling weeds, planting barley, or dragging irrigation tools through wet soil under the watchful eye of an overseer whose primary talent appears to be shouting. You work with wooden plows, crude sickles, and your bare hands. Your back aches, your shoulders burn. That's not a problem. That means it's working. If you're a laborer, things escalate quickly. Imagine hauling multi-ton stone blocks for temple construction under a sun that feels personal. You're barefoot, climbing ramps made of gravel, sweat, and optimism. One misstep means a twisted ankle, a broken bone, or worse, and the response from above is usually a shrug, as someone else will take your place. Working on tombs is its own special category of irony. You spend your days hammering limestone, carving burial chambers, and smoothing walls for people who will rest for longer than you ever will. Every strike of your chisel echoes with the knowledge that this monument will outlive your entire bloodline. And make no mistake, mistakes matter. If you mess up a pharaoh's tomb, job security may involve sealed chambers, curses, or vanishing from the record entirely if you're a woman. There is no exemption, and domestic labor is just as physical, just as relentless. You grind grain by hand, haul water from the Nile, weave linen, cook, clean, and care for children, all while still helping in the fields when needed. Your break comes when the baby naps, which lasts approximately 7 minutes if the gods are feeling merciful. There is no separation between work and life. While you prepare dinner, you eat on the move, you wipe sweat from your face with your tunic. You keep moving because slowing down means falling behind. And falling behind means someone else gets your grain quota while you get the blame. There is no clock to punch, no bell to signal the end of the day. The sun is your supervisor. Only when it finally sinks toward the horizon does the work loosen its grip. You crawl home half alive, dust-caked, muscles trembling, dreaming of softer sandals and a less aggressive sun god. Work in ancient Egypt isn't just hard, it's endless. The Pharaoh is a god. So don't complain. Work in ancient Egypt isn't just hard, it's endless. It demands your entire body, day after day, season after season, until your strength fades or an overseer decides you're no longer worth the grain it takes to keep you alive. And somehow, that still isn't the worst part, because after hours of hauling stone, pulling weeds, or baking under the open sky, a dangerous thought might creep into your mind, something small, harmless. Even this job is miserable. Why am I doing this? Stop right there. In ancient Egypt, complaining isn't just poor manners, it's potentially treason. Why? Because your boss isn't just a ruler, he isn't a king in the modern sense, he is a living god. The Pharaoh is the human embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed god, son of Ra himself, chosen by the heavens. He exists to keep the divine cosmic order intact, balance, truth, stability. The entire universe rests on his shoulders. If the Nile floods properly, feeding the fields and filling the granaries, you thank the Pharaoh. If it doesn't, well, clearly someone didn't pray hard enough. Questioning his authority isn't political dissent, it's blasphemy. Speak ill of him, even in private, and the consequences are immediate and physical. A whip, shackles, forced labor, or an expedited journey to the underworld without your amulets, your offerings, or any hope of a comfortable afterlife. And you are constantly reminded of who he is. His face stares back at you from statues, temple walls, coins, and even bread molds. His name is repeated in prayers. His image towers over every mural, always painted larger than everyone else. That isn't artistic exaggeration, that's the law. And despite his presence being everywhere, you will almost certainly never see him. If you're a commoner, your closest encounter might be watching a golden ceremonial barge glide past during a religious festival. Blink, and it's gone. The god king returns to a palace you will never enter, surrounded by guards, scribes, officials, and enough gold to bankroll an entire civilization, which, incidentally, he does if you're fortunate or unfortunate enough to work on a royal project. Perhaps a temple, a tomb, or a statue the size of a mountain. You are expected to feel honored. You serve with divine joy, at least. That's what the state insists. You say it too. You smile, you bow. You pretend that carving stone for 14 hours under a merciless sun is a blessing, because pretending is safer than the alternative. And rebellion, don't even consider it. Pharaohs crush uprisings faster than you can say dynasty. Entire villages have vanished for withholding taxes or resisting authority. You can't ask them what happened, they're gone. So yes, the Pharaoh is divine, his rule is absolute, his will is cosmic law, and you're simply fortunate to be allowed to sweat in his name. And now stop thinking and get back to work. K7 Sand, your roommate, your seasoning, your enemy. If you thought surviving under the sun was the hardest part of life in ancient Egypt, Think again, the real challenge isn't just heat, it's sand. The sand is your roommate, your coworker, your seasoning, and your most relentless enemy. It's everywhere, in your clothes, in your bed, in your food. There is no escaping it. You can be working in the fields, praying in a temple, sleeping on your mat, or minding your own business at the market, and suddenly a gust of hot wind sweeps through, turning your face into a grainy exfoliation experiment you never signed up for. Let's start with clothing. You wear linen, light, breathable, and almost completely useless against sand. It slips under your tunic, sticks to your sweaty skin, and somehow finds its way into places you didn't know had folds. Eating becomes an exercise in acceptance. Every loaf of bread is basically a sand trap waiting to happen. That's not bad luck, it's manufacturing. Flour is ground between stone slabs, and tiny bits of grit break off into the dough. Egyptians don't just eat wheat, they eat their millstones too. It's why so many ancient skulls show teeth worn flat like river pebbles. Imagine chewing breakfast while simultaneously filing your molars down to nubs every single day. And if you're hoping your home offers relief, abandon that dream immediately. Your mud brick house is full of gaps, cracks, and windows with no glass. Perfect entry points for wind-blown sand. It coats the floor, it settles into cooking pots, it sneaks into storage jars. Your bed, a straw mat, is less a place to rest and more a disguised sand pit. Shoes, optional at best. Most people walk barefoot, which means every step risks turning your feet into battered leather sandals. If you're lucky enough to own footwear, it's usually a simple pair of reed sandals, a stylish, maybe protective, not even slightly. And then there are sandstorms, Egypt's version of a slap from the gods. They arrive suddenly, swirling, blinding, violent. One moment you're mid-conversation, the next you're coughing, squinting, and spitting dust while the world dissolves into beige chaos. Visibility drops to nothing. Everyone becomes a vague, choking silhouette stumbling through the air. In short, sand is the roommate who never leaves, the spice in every meal, the silent enemy of your eyes, your lungs, and your dignity. It's not just the backdrop of your life, it's part of your body now. And no, you can't wash it off. You already tried in the Nile, which, let's be honest, is probably full of sand to gods everywhere. Religion as an operating system. In ancient Egypt, religion isn't something you practice once a week. It isn't confined to temples or festivals. It is the operating system that runs your entire existence, your job, your diet, your hygiene, your sleep, even the way you stub your toe. All of it is governed by gods who seem to have very specific opinions about your behavior. First, understand this: the gods are everywhere. Your town is filled with temples and shrines dedicated to dozens of deities, each responsible for some vital aspect of life. Pharaoh pilots the sun across the sky every day like a divine chauffeur. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, oversees scribes, knowledge, and the lunar calendar of Sobek, part crocodile, part nightmare fuel, guards the Nile and everything lurking beneath its surface. And Bastet, the Ket goddess, handles protection, fertility, and public relations, because someone clearly needed to manage the brand image. Personal freedom isn't really a concept here. Your daily routine revolves around keeping these gods satisfied. You wake up and thank Ra for not incinerating the planet overnight. You spill a little beer as an offering. You apologize to Hathor just in case you offended her yesterday. You stub your toe, curse quietly, then immediately rethink that decision because anger attracts spirits with grudges. Before meals, you offer a portion of food to the gods. Before sleep, you pray that Set, the god of chaos, doesn't decide tonight is a good night to rearrange your life into existential rubble. Even death doesn't give you a break. Funerals aren't simple farewells. They are elaborate, multi-day preparations for a dangerous journey. The deceased must pass trials, avoid demons, recite spells correctly, and prove they lived a morally decent life. Failure doesn't mean punishment, it means erasure, because in ancient Egypt, You don't just die and move on. Your heart is weighed against the feather of Mat, the embodiment of truth, balance, and order. If your heart is heavier because of lies, cruelty, or maybe stealing your neighbor's goat, it's game over. You are devoured by a myth, a creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the back end of pure nightmare. No afterlife and no second chances, just permanent non-existence. So yes, even in death, you're still on probation. And yet, here's the twist. This belief system isn't depressing, it's comforting. The Egyptians believed life was part of a vast cosmic balance. If you followed the rituals, respected the gods, and upheld Mat, you had a real chance at a peaceful eternity, one with food, family, familiar landscapes, and maybe even your own boat to sail forever under gentle sunlight. Of course, wealth helped. The richer you were, the more attentive the gods seemed to become. Temples were massive, priests were powerful, offerings flowed generously. Peasants, meanwhile, crossed their fingers and hoped the divine mood was favorable that day, because in ancient Egypt, faith isn't optional. It's your job description, your insurance policy, and your travel itinerary for the next life. Medicine, honey, spells, and pure courage. So, you've stepped on something sharp, been bitten by something you can't identify, or caught a mysterious illness. In ancient Egypt, that's not bad luck, that's just a normal weekday. Either way, you're injured, feverish, or leaking in ways you'd rather not be, which means it's time to seek medical help. Like, just don't expect a clean room, a waiting area, or anything remotely sterile. You're about to be treated with a carefully balanced combination of practical knowledge, religious ritual, and sheer optimism. First, you're taken to a doctor, and to be fair, ancient Egyptian physicians were among the most advanced in the ancient world. They had specialized medical texts, surgical instruments, and a surprisingly solid understanding of anatomy gained through mummification. They could set broken bones, stitch wounds, and identify symptoms with impressive accuracy. But here's the catch. In ancient Egypt, science never traveled alone. It always brought magic along for the ride. Your treatment begins with a paste, a thick, sticky mixture made of honey, crushed herbs, and sometimes moldy bread. It doesn't look reassuring, but here's the twist. Honey is antibacterial, and certain molds have early antibiotic properties. So yes, this actually works. Sometimes, and before applying it, however, the healer chants a protective spell, because you never know whether your stomach cramps are caused by spoiled food or a petty god who didn't like your attitude yesterday. A headache, expect crushed onions rubbed into your scalp while a hymn to Thoth is whispered nearby. Chest pain, someone may smear a mixture of cow dung and dates across your skin and wait to see what the gods decide. By infection, that's a paste of ochre, beer, lizard blood, and a prayer to Horus. Results may vary. Surgery does happen, though it's not for the faint of heart. Abscesses are drained, wounds are stitched with linen thread, broken bones are aligned and splinted, and there is no anesthesia, no numbing agent, and no gentle countdown. Just a sharp blade, a steady hand, and someone strong enough to hold you down while you scream into a mud brick pillow. Dentistry is where things truly fall apart. Remember all that sand in your bread? It's been grinding your teeth down since childhood. By your 20s, your molars look like river stones. If a tooth becomes infected, your options are limited. You can live with the pains, you can die from the infection, or you can have the tooth pulled with something resembling pliers, likely crafted by a blacksmith who was better at horseshoes than human mouths. And throughout all of this, there are amulets. Whether you're giving birth, being stitched up, or sneezing a little too often, someone will hang a charm around your neck, a scarab, a protective eye, a tiny figure meant to scare away whatever invisible serpent spirit might be coiled around your spleen, causing all this trouble. Because in ancient Egypt, illness isn't just physical, it's spiritual, cosmic, and deeply personal. So yes, Egyptian medicine had moments of brilliance. It laid foundations for anatomy, pharmacology, and surgery, but survival still depended heavily on belief. Because when your bandage is a prayer, your painkiller is hope, and your insurance plan is the goodwill of the gods. Courage isn't optional, it's part of the treatment. Women's rights versus women's reality. Here's a plot twist most people don't expect, in many ways. Women in ancient Egypt had more legal rights than women in numerous societies that came centuries later. They could own and inherit property. They could run businesses, sign contracts, file for divorce, and even take men to court in their own name, legally speaking. They were recognized as individuals, not possessions on paper. It sounds remarkably progressive, but before you start imagining ancient Egypt as an early feminist paradise, it's time for a reality check, because while the law may have granted women agency, daily life demanded endurance. If you're a woman in ancient Egypt, your day likely begins before sunrise, not with reflection or quiet rituals, but with physical labor. If you're kneeling over a massive stone grinder, crushing grain by hand, the wheat breaks down slowly, your back aches almost immediately. This isn't a workout, this is survival. Once the grain is ground, the real marathon begins. You haul water from the Nile, you cook, you clean, you manage the household, you feed animals, you care for children, and when necessary, you work in the fields alongside the men. You are, in effect, a one-woman workforce wrapped in linen. There are no breaks, no me time, no concept of rest as a right. Motherhood adds another layer of danger. Childbirth is painful, risky, and unpredictable. Midwives are experienced, yes, but they work without anesthesia, disinfectants, or modern tools. You give birth in a hot room filled with incense, prayers, and anxious relatives, hoping the bleeding stops and the gods are feeling merciful that day. There are no guarantees, and no second chances. Even the everyday comforts we take for granted simply don't exist. Clothing is light and breathable, but that's where comfort ends. There's no underwear, shoes are rare, sand grinds against your skin constantly. The sun scorches, insects swarm, your body is exposed to heat, dirt, and bites from dawn until nightfall. Makeup exists, yes, but it's sleep-based and applied with thin sticks that look more like tools than cosmetics. Beauty, like everything else, comes with risk for women born into wealth. Life offers more options. You might learn to read and write, you might manage estates, oversee workers, or serve as a priestess in a temple. And if you're born into royalty, the ceiling disappears entirely. Women like Hatshepsut and Cleopatra ruled as pharaohs, wielding real power, commanding armies, shaping history, all while wearing eyeliner sharp enough to intimidate foreign diplomats. But for the vast majority of women, status exists mostly on parchment. If you're poor, your rights may be legally recognized, but your life is defined by physical strain. You bend, you carry, you cook, you give birth, you bury loved ones, you pray. You are not owned by law, but you are bound by necessity. Still, those rights mattered. Egyptian women could speak in court. They kept their names, their property, and their inheritance after marriage. They were not absorbed into their husband's identity. Compared to many ancient societies, this was extraordinary. But comfort was reserved for statues, queens, and goddesses carved in stone, not for the woman kneading dough with aching hands, swatting flies away from a toddler, and hoping tomorrow is no harder than today. The real test begins after death. You survived the day, you ate your gritty bread, hauled heavy water jars, sweated under a merciless sun, avoided offending the gods, and maybe if you were lucky escaped the sandstorm. By any modern standard, you've earned rest. But in ancient Egypt, rest is not your reward, because the true test doesn't begin when you lie down to sleep, it begins when you died. In ancient Egypt, Death is not an ending, it's the start of an intensely regulated, multi-stage journey through the afterlife, one that makes earthly labor feel almost forgiving if you thought your overseer was strict. Just wait until you meet the gods of judgment. Your soul is summoned to the Hall of Mot, a vast cosmic courtroom where order, truth, and balance reign supreme. Here, you stand before a tribunal of 42 divine judges. There is no lawyer, no appeal, no opportunity to explain context. You must recite what is known as the negative confession, a declaration of innocence. You proclaim things like, I did not steal, I did not lie, I did not cheat, I did not covet my neighbor's donkey. And you say all of this while hoping the gods believe you. Then comes the moment that decides everything. Your heart, believed to be the seat of your soul memory and moral weight, is removed and placed on a scale. Upon the other side rests the feather of Mat, the symbol of truth, justice, and cosmic balance. If your heart is lighter than the feather, you pass. If it is heavier, even slightly, your journey ends here. Waiting beside the scales is Amit. She is not merciful, she is not patient, she is not interested in excuses. Part lion, part crocodile, part hippo, the three most dangerous animals Egyptians knew. Amit does not imprison you or punish you. She devours your soul completely. No afterlife, no rebirth, no second chances. In a civilization obsessed with eternity, this fate, total annihilation, is the ultimate horror, and the margin for error is terrifyingly small. You are judged not only by your actions, but by your words. One incorrect confession, one forgotten line, one moral slip you hoped wouldn't count fail, and your soul is erased forever. It's like an open book exam where failure means being eaten by a mythological nightmare. But if you succeed, if your heart balances perfectly, you are rewarded. You enter the field of reeds, an idealized version of Egypt where everything works as it should have in life. The crops are plentiful, the Nile is calm, your family is there, you farm without exhaustion, eat without hunger, and sail peaceful waters under gentle sunlight. Eternity, at last, feels kind, and that is why Egyptians obsessed over death while they were alive. Tombs were prepared years in advance, bodies were carefully preserved. Funeral rites were performed with precision. Magical texts like the Book of the Dead were buried alongside the deceased, filled with spells, passwords, prayers, and practical advice, essentially a spiritual survival guide for the afterlife. Instructions like which gods to greet, which demons to avoid, and, above all, don't insult the crocodile god, because in ancient Egypt, the afterlife could be beautiful but only if you lived carefully. One unpaid temple tax, one careless curse, one moral misstep, and your eternal journey ends in Amit's jaws. Sleep tight, and mercy and daily discomfort. Sleep tight if you can, because if there is one small mercy in ancient Egypt, it's linen. Blessed, breathable linen. Nearly every piece of clothing you own is made from it, and for good reason. It's light, airy, and allows your skin to breathe under the crushing desert sun in a land where shade is scarce and heat is relentless. Linen is not a fashion choice, it's survival, but that's where the comfort largely ends. Whether you're a farmer, a stone hauler, a market vendor, or a temple servant, you wear essentially the same outfit every single day. For men, it's a short white kilt or loincloth. For women, a straight sleeveless dress that hangs from the shoulders, sometimes with straps, sometimes held up by optimism alone. Variety is minimal, expression is optional. Laundry, however, is unavoidable if you belong to the upper class. Your linen might be finely woven, pleated, or decorated with beads and patterns. If you don't, your clothing is plain white, or more accurately, an off-white shade slowly drifting toward gray, depending on how long it's been since it last met the Nile. And when laundry day comes, you're scrubbing those garments by hand in river water while keeping one eye on the shoreline, hoping a crocodile or hippo doesn't decide to join the activity. Footwear is another luxury. Most people walk barefoot, navigating scorching sand, gravel, and sharp stones with feet that slowly harden into something closer to leather than skin. Sandals made from reeds or leather exist, but they're usually reserved for priests, officials, or special occasions, unless you're important. Your heels will learn pain the hard way. Accessories, though, are common but mostly practical. Amulets hang from necks to ward off illness, misfortune, or angry spirits. Jewelry displays status more than beauty. Eye makeup, dark coal made from powdered minerals, is worn by men, women, and children alike. It's not just decorative, it reduces glare from the sun, protects the eyes from infection, and conveniently makes everyone look permanently dramatic. Yes, even eyeliner had a job in ancient Egypt. Still, no amount of linen or cosmetics can protect you from the insects. Flies swarm constantly. Gnats and mosquitoes see your light clothing as an open invitation. You spend much of your day swatting, rubbing perfumed oils onto your skin, and trying not to scratch yourself for a while the sun climbs higher. And once the heat peaks, your linen, light and forgiving as it is, sticks to your body like a damp curtain. There's also no seasonal relief. Egypt doesn't really have seasons, just variations of hot. Pure clothing doesn't change, your discomfort doesn't pause. The sun rises, the sand heats, the bugs arrive, and your linen does its best to help quietly, patiently, while the rest of the environment does absolutely nothing in your favor. Linen may be mercy, but it's a very thin one. Short life. Carefully planned. So yes, Egyptian clothing was light, breathable, and far more practical than the heavy garments Romans would later suffer through. But don't let the flowing linen fool you. No matter how airy your tunic feels against your skin, life itself remains heavy. Heavy with labor, heavy with heat, heavy with sand that infiltrates everything you touch, and heavy with insects that seem personally offended by your existence. You've made it through another day. You hauled stone or grain, sweated under a merciless sun, avoided injury, avoided divine punishment, and somehow kept your linen intact. That alone feels like an accomplishment. But in ancient Egypt, survival is never a long-term plan, because statistically speaking, you probably won't live past 35, and that's if you're lucky. If you survive childhood, already a major victory given the frighteningly high infant mortality rates. You're considered ready for adult life by your early teens. By 13 or 14, you're expected to work, marry, and begin producing the next generation. There's no such thing as finding yourself. There's only finding food, shelter, and enough strength to make it through the day. And death can come from anywhere. Heat stroke under the midday sun, an infected cut from a farming tool, a childbirth, which claims countless women, a crocodiles lurking along the river banks, scorpion stings in the dark, red so coarse it grinds your teeth into dust and opens the door to infection. And if sickness strikes, there are no antibiotics waiting in a clay jar. Treatment consists of honey, herbs, prayers, and the hope that the gods are feeling merciful. Yet here's the surprising part. Ancient Egyptians weren't terrified of death. They planned for it. In fact, they planned for it with extraordinary care, often more thoughtfully than people today plan for old age. A death wasn't an ending, it was a transition, a bureaucratic process that required preparation, paperwork, and proper equipment. If you were wealthy, you commissioned a tomb long before you needed it, an eternal residence designed to last longer than any house you lived in while alive. Inside it, you stocked grave goods, jewelry, furniture, food offerings, cosmetics, perfumes, and protective amulets. Everything you might need to live comfortably forever. You also invested in Shapta, small figurines placed in your tomb to serve you in the afterlife. These little statues were believed to spring to life when commanded, performing labor on your behalf in the field of reeds, farming, harrying, working. The tasks you were done doing, think of them as spiritual interns bound by magic, and paid, and eternally productive while you rest for eternity. Of life in ancient Egypt may have been short, exhausting, and unforgiving, but if you planned correctly, death promised something rare: rest. tombs, mummies, and an equal eternity. When death finally claims you in ancient Egypt, the work doesn't stop. In fact, for your family, priests, and embalmers, it's only just beginning, because in this world, how you are prepared for eternity matters almost as much as how you lived. If you were wealthy, your body is handed over to professional embalmers. Organs are carefully removed, preserved, or stored in canopic jars guarded by divine beings. Your body is dried with natron, a naturally occurring salt, until every trace of moisture is gone. Then comes the wrapping, layer upon layer of linen, each fold accompanied by prayers, spells, and protective amulets placed precisely where they're needed. You are sealed inside a painted sarcophagus, your face idealized, calm, eternal. Alongside you rests the Book of the Dead, and despite its ominous title, it's less a book of endings and more a supernatural instruction manual. It contains spells, declarations of innocence, secret names, and verbal passwords meant to guide you safely through the afterlife. Think of it as a spiritual navigation system. One wrong turn, and something with claws is waiting out. Eternity, like life, is deeply unequal. If you were poor, your preparation is brief. Your body might be wrapped in a single piece of cloth, perhaps reused linen from daily life. Your grave is a shallow pit scraped into the sand, a clay pot or two might be placed nearby. No murals, no spells written in gold ink, just earth, silence, and hope. Yet even among the poorest Egyptians, the belief in the afterlife never fades. Everyone dreams of the same destination, the field of reeds, a perfect mirror of Egypt itself, but without hunger, without labor, without pain. The Nile flows gently, crops grow effortlessly, boats glide across calm waters, families are reunited. The sun is warm, but never cruel. So yes, you probably die young in ancient Egypt, but if you lived according to Matt, honored the gods, spoke truthfully, and avoided angering anything with a jackal's head or a crocodile's jaws, eternity might still welcome you. And at last, you arrive. You've been embalmed, wrapped, a blessed buried. The tomb is sealed, the darkness falls, silence settles in, time to rest in peace. Except that isn't quite how it works. Even the dead aren't safe, because in ancient Egypt, death does not guarantee peace, not even close. Tombs are treasure chests sealed in stone, gold amulets tucked between linen wrappings, jewelry meant to protect the soul, perfumed oils, carved statues, food offerings, furniture, ritual objects, and for kings and nobles, entire fleets of ceremonial boats, chariots, weapons, and riches meant to last for eternity, which makes one uncomfortable truth unavoidable: where there is treasure, there are thieves. A tomb robbery wasn't rare, it wasn't unusual. It was so common it became an expected risk of the afterlife. Entire professions emerged around it. Some robbers were desperate peasants, others were organized groups with inside knowledge, and many worked with help from the very people meant to guard the dead. Pharaohs tried everything to stop them. Tombs were hidden deep in cliffs. Entrances were sealed with stone blocks weighing tons. Corridors were filled with rubble. False doors led nowhere. Burial chambers were buried under layers of rock and sand. Walls were covered in curses promising blindness, madness, crocodile attacks, or eternal punishment for anyone who dared disturb the tomb. The message was clear: disturb the dead, and the gods will destroy you. It didn't help. Robbers learned the layouts. They dug around walls instead of through them. They followed airflow to hidden chambers. They reused old tunnels. Some tombs were looted within decades of burial. Others were stripped bare while the memories of the dead were still fresh. Even royal tombs weren't safe. Even divine kings, wrapped in gold and spells, were dragged into daylight by hands that feared hunger more than curses, which means that in ancient Egypt, eternity came with no guarantees. You could live carefully, die properly, be wrapped, blessed, and sealed behind stone, and still be robbed in the dark. Because in this world, even the afterlife has thieves. grave robbers, hunger, and moral collapse. The grave robbers came anyway. They always did. They arrived at night, quietly, carrying tools and knowledge passed hand to hand. Some were locals who knew the land, some were laborers who had helped carve the tombs themselves, others were guards, priests, or officials who knew exactly where the seals were weakest and which chambers held the most valuable offerings. The dead trusted the living to protect them, the living, often hungry and desperate, made different choices. The punishments for tomb robbery were brutal: public beatings, mutilation, forced labor, exile, sometimes execution. Ancient legal records describe criminals being whipped, branded, or sentenced to death for disturbing the dead. The crime was not just theft, it was sacrilege, an attack on cosmic order itself, and yet people kept doing it because the rewards were enormous: gold amulets, jewelry, rare incense, copper tools. Even linen wrappings could be resold. A single successful robbery could feed a family for months. In a land where survival was never guaranteed, the risk often felt worth it, and it wasn't only the rich who were targeted. Even the graves of ordinary people were opened. A poor farmer might be buried with nothing more than a loaf of bread, a jar of beer, or a simple charm for protection. But when famine struck, even those humble offerings became valuable. Food meant for the afterlife could mean life for the living. This is the uncomfortable truth. Tomb robbery wasn't always driven by greed, as sometimes it was driven by hunger. Egypt experienced periods of drought, failed floods, political chaos, and foreign invasion. When the Nile didn't rise, crops failed. When crops failed, people starved, and when children cried from hunger, the boundary between sacred and survival began to blur. A burial offering stopped being a holy symbol, it became dinner. So even in death, you were not safe. Your tomb could be broken open, your name scratched away, your mummy unwrapped by trembling hands that feared starvation more than divine punishment. In ancient Egypt, eternity depended not just on ritual and faith, but on secrecy. Rest in peace, only if no one knows where you are buried. Hieroglyphs, power carved in stone. We've all seen them, those elegant, mysterious symbols carved into temple walls and tombs. Birds frozen mid-stepwise staring outward, as snakes coiled in silence, lotus flowers blooming in stone, human figures posed in impossible angles, bodies facing forward while heads turned sideways, as if time itself obeyed different rules here. These are hieroglyphs, the sacred writing system of ancient Egypt. At first glance, they feel decorative, almost artistic, the kind of ancient wallpaper meant to impress. But hieroglyphs were never just images, they were language made visible, power given form, and belief locked into stone. Learning to read them was not for everyone. Hieroglyphs were complex, layered, and unforgiving. The single symbol could represent a sound, a word, an idea, or all three at once depending on context. The meaning changed based on placement, direction, and combination. Some symbols were phonetic, others were symbolic, some existed only to clarify meaning, like silent guardians ensuring the message was interpreted correctly. This complexity was intentional. Literacy was power, and power was tightly controlled. Only a small elite, scribes trained for years, temple priests, and royal officials could read and write fluently. For everyone else, hieroglyphs were something you stood before, not something you understood. They communicated authority even when their meaning was hidden, and hieroglyphs were believed to be alive. To carve a name into stone was to grant it existence beyond death. To erase a name was to destroy someone's chance at eternity. That is why tombs were covered in inscriptions, prayers, spells, biographies, and warnings to the living. Words were not passive, they acted, they protected, they punished. Hieroglyphs weren't written casually, they were arranged with care, aligned with cosmic order. Symbols faced inward toward sacred spaces. Dangerous creatures were often carved incomplete, their power symbolically neutralized, so they could not harm the dead. Every line was deliberate, every symbol carried weight. To live in ancient Egypt was to exist beneath writing you could not read. surrounded by messages meant for gods, kings, and the afterlife. Hieroglyphs reminded everyone of their place in the universe, who ruled, who served, and who would be remembered long after their bones turned to dust. Stone spoke in Egypt, and it spoke with authority. Writing as magic. Literacy as privilege. Hieroglyphs were never meant to be simple decoration. They formed a complete and highly sophisticated writing system, one of the most complex ever created. By the height of ancient Egyptian civilization, there were more than 700 distinct hieroglyphic signs, and the system continued to evolve for centuries. Some symbols represented entire words or concepts, while others stood for individual sounds. Much like letters, many functioned as determinative silent symbols placed at the end of words to clarify meaning. A word describing movement might end with a walking figure. A word connected to danger might be followed by a knife or a flame. These symbols didn't change pronunciation, but they shaped understanding, guiding the reader toward the correct interpretation. This made reading hieroglyphs an act of interpretation, not simple decoding, and very few people were allowed to learn it. Literacy in ancient Egypt was extremely rare. Scholars estimate that perhaps 1% of the population could read and write fluently. Those who could belong to a privileged class. Scribes trained from childhood, priests entrusted with sacred texts, and officials serving the state or temples. To become a scribe meant years of brutal education. Students memorized signs, copied texts endlessly, and learned to write with precision on papyrus, wood, and stone. Mistakes were punished. Discipline was strict, but success meant something extraordinary: freedom from physical labor, social status, and lifelong employment. Writing was not just a skill, it was a pathway out of hardship for everyone else. Words remained mysterious and powerful. Most Egyptians encountered writing only on temple walls, tombs, monuments, and official decrees. They could not read the messages, but they understood their significance. Writing carried authority. It belonged to gods and kings, and an Egyptian belief. Writing was more than communication. Words had power simply by existing. A spell carved into stone could protect a soul forever. A curse written on a wall could follow a thief into the afterlife. To write something down was to make it real, permanent, and active in the universe. This is why literacy was controlled so carefully, because in ancient Egypt, to write was not merely to record reality, it was to shape it. Would you survive one day? After everything you've witnessed, the heat that never relents, the hunger that never fully fades, the sand that invades every corner of life, the gods who watch every action, and the labor that consumes both body and time. It's finally time to ask the question that brought us here. Would you survive a single day in ancient Egypt? If we're honest, probably not. An ordinary day began before sunrise, on a dirt floor, surrounded by flies, heat, and the quiet understanding that if you did not work, you did not eat. There were no alarms, no schedules written on paper, only the sun and the river dictating your existence. Every task demanded physical effort, every mistake carried consequences. Rest was brief, a comfort was rare. There was no toothpaste to protect worn teeth ground down by sand-filled bread, no antibiotics for infected cuts, no retirement, no safety net, no promise that tomorrow would be easier than today. Your entire life fit into a narrow routine of labor, prayer, and survival, repeated until your body could no longer keep up. Even clothing, that small mercy of breathable linen, was limited. A couple of garments at most, no closets, no shoes for most people, just fabric, skin, sun, and dust. Medicine relied on courage as much as knowledge. Faith filled the gaps where certainty failed. And yet this is the part worth remembering. Ancient Egyptians endured. Not for a year, not for a generation, but for thousands of years. They built a civilization that mastered stone, mathematics, medicine, agriculture, art, and writing. They aligned temples with stars, they measured time, they imagined eternity, they created a world so stable that its symbols still speak to us across millennia. So no, you probably wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt, but they did, and in doing so, they left behind one of the most enduring legacies humanity has ever known. Now let the fire crackle, let the past fade gently into the dark, and rest knowing that tonight, at least, you are safe. The city built for gods, not comfort. Now the world changes, the green banks of the Nile dissolve into dust, and a different civilization rises beneath a harsher sky. You awaken not in Egypt, but in the highlands of ancient Mesoamerica, in a city that predates the Aztecs by centuries, a place once known as Teotihuacan, the city where the gods were born. Before you can fully take in your surroundings, the pyramid of the sun dominates your vision. It rises from the ground with overwhelming force. A mountain of stone shaped by human hands, its steps radiate heat, storing the sun's energy like a furnace. By midday, the air itself feels sharp and dry, thin with altitude, and merciless in its stillness. There is no great river here to cradle civilization, and no Nile to flood and renew the land. To water is precious and certain, and fiercely controlled. The survival depends on rainfall, carefully engineered canals, underground reservoirs, and an exact understanding of seasonal cycles. When the rains fail, hunger follows. When timing is wrong, entire neighborhoods suffer. Teotihuacan is vast and meticulously planned, aligned not for comfort, but for the cosmos. Streets stretch in long, rigid lines, oriented to celestial movements rather than human convenience. Stone dominates everything: walls, platforms, pyramids, endless volcanic rock underfoot. Shade is rare, trees are few. Your feet ache as you walk across hard ground from sunrise to sunset, each step reminding you that this city was not designed for rest. The population is enormous, tens of thousands live here: farmers, artisans, priests, merchants, builders. Apartment compounds cluster along wide avenues, packed tightly together. Smoke from hearths lingers in the air, mixing with the scents of maize, chili, sweat, incense, and something darker beneath it all: blood. Because this is not a peaceful city, Teotihuacan runs on ritual obligation. The gods are believed to sustain the universe through sacrifice, and in return, they must be fed. Offerings are constant: animals, valuables, food, and sometimes people. The pyramids are not monuments to human greatness, they are engines of cosmic balance, built to maintain the movement of the sun, the seasons, and time itself. Here, life is secondary to divine order. Comfort is irrelevant, hindrance is expected. You are not the center of the world, you are a small piece within a vast sacred machine. This is a city built for gods, and if you live here, you exist to serve them. The price of the sun. At the very heart of Teotihuacan rises the temple of the feathered serpent. Its carved stone facade stares outward with unmoving eyes, rows of serpent heads, feathers frozen in volcanic rock, watching silently as rituals unfold below. The air here is never truly quiet. Our drums beat in slow, steady rhythms, shells are blown like distant horns, and the sound rolls across the plaza like a living pulse. This is where the city pays its debt to the universe. Human sacrifice here is not an act of cruelty, nor a punishment for crime. It is understood as duty, a sacred exchange. Life offered so the sun may continue its journey across the sky. Blood spilled so time itself does not fracture. In the worldview of Teotihuacan, existence depends on balance, and balance demands payment. Archaeology reveals what no written record ever could beneath the temple, hidden under layers of stone and ritual architecture. Mass graves have been uncovered and dozens of individuals buried together, warriors bound at the wrists, some decapitated with obsidian blades, others laid carefully into the earth, still adorned with shells and ceremonial ornaments. These were not enemies or outcasts. They were offerings, chosen participants in a cosmic economy. To live in Teotihuacan was to grow up knowing this truth. From childhood, you would understand that the gods were powerful, unpredictable, and eternally hungry. Their favor sustained the city. Their displeasure could bring drought, famine, or collapse. Appeasing them was not optional, it was survival. And you would also know that ritual obligation could reach anyone. A festival, a dedication, a moment when the balance felt threatened. Your name could be spoken. Your role assigned. Resistance was not part of the system. Acceptance was the highest form of obedience in Teotihuacan. Life was not owned, it was borrowed, and every borrowed thing must eventually be returned. Food, fear, and fragile balance. A daily life in Teotihuacan is built on simplicity and uncertainty. Meals are modest and repetitive. Corn tortillas form the foundation of almost everything you eat, accompanied by beans and squash when supplies allow. Chili peppers add flavor, but only if the harvest has been kind. Meat is rare, turkey or dog reserved for ceremonies or special occasions. Hunger is not dramatic here, it is quiet, familiar, and always nearby. Famine is never a distant threat. The city depends on rain timing and fragile agricultural systems. One failed season can tip everything out of balance. When crops fail, fear spreads faster than hunger itself. Empty storage rooms lead to unrest, and unrest, in this world, is not solved through debate or reform. It is addressed through ritual. When the gods seem displeased, the answer is not policy, it is sacrifice. Disease moves easily through dense stone housing where thousands live tightly packed together. There is no understanding of bacteria or infection. Illness is seen as a spiritual disruption, a sign that harmony has been broken. Treatment combines herbal remedies with bloodletting, smoke, chants, and offerings. Healing is as much about restoring cosmic balance as it is about easing pain. Sometimes it works, often it doesn't. Children grow up fast. There is little room for leisure from an early age. They carry water, grind maize, tend fires, and learn the rhythms of labor. Play exists, but it is brief and secondary. Survival comes first. A childhood here is not a protected space, it is a short preparation for endurance. Life expectancy is low, but belief is unshakable. Faith is strong enough to organize cities, mobilize labor, and raise pyramids that dominate the horizon. Even centuries later, stone structures outlast the hands that built them. The people accept this permanence belongs to the gods, not to flesh. And then, without warning, the balance finally breaks. The great city burns. Fires sweep through palaces and ceremonial centers. Statues are shattered and temples are defaced, whether through internal revolt, environmental collapse, or ritualized abandonment. Teotihuacan is emptied. The gods are fed one last time. The streets fall silent. The city of gods becomes a city of ghosts, and long after its people are gone, the pyramids remain watching, waiting, reminding us that belief can build wonders, and just as easily consume them. Asterisk collapse without explanation, sometime around the 6th century. Teotihuacan begins to die, not slowly, not quietly, but violently. Fires tear through the heart of the city, targeting its most important spaces. Elite compounds burn, temples are deliberately defaced, stone statues are smashed, not by time or erosion, but by human hands. Faces are broken, sacred imagery is destroyed with intention, as if the city itself is rejecting what it once worshipped. What makes this collapse so unsettling is what isn't found. There is no evidence of a foreign invasion, no mass graves of fallen defenders, no enemy weapons scattered across the streets. Archaeology offers no clear sign of conquest. Instead, everything points inward, a destruction carried out by the people who lived there, or by factions within the city itself. Why did it happen? No one knows. Some scholars suggest rebellion or revolt of the lower classes against elites who lived in comfort while others struggled. Others point to prolonged drought, crop failures, and environmental stress that made life unsustainable. Overpopulation may have stretched resources to thin, and perhaps most unsettling of all is the idea of religious failure in the sea. It is built entirely around ritual obligation. What happens when the rituals stop working? If sacrifices no longer bring rain? If ceremonies fail to prevent hunger? If the gods remain silent while suffering grows, faith itself can fracture, and when belief collapses, so does the social order built upon it, whatever the cause. The result is clear. The population leaves, slowly at first, then completely. Homes are abandoned, workshops fall silent, fires fade to ash, the great avenues empty. The city that once held tens of thousands becomes a shell of stone and memory. The pyramids remain, they stand exactly where they always have, and moving beneath the sky, watching as the people who gave them meaning disappear. Later civilizations will arrive, look upon these ruins, and call the place sacred. They will invent stories to explain it, but the truth is already gone. Teotihuacan does not fall to an enemy, it collapses from within, a final reminder that in the ancient world, survival was never guaranteed. No matter how powerful the city, how advanced its planning, or how devoted its people were to the gods they believed would protect them. Survival was never the goal. When we look back at ancient civilizations, Egypt along the Nile, the cities of Mesopotamia, the stone metropolises of Mesoamerica, it's easy to assume they were all striving for the same thing we value today: survival, comfort, security. But that was never the goal for the ancient world. Survival was not an achievement, it was merely the starting condition. What mattered far more was balance, order, alignment with forces far greater than any individual life. You lived briefly, by our standards, a few decades. If fortune allowed, you worked from sunrise to sunset. You followed rituals whose origins were already ancient by the time you were born. You obeyed laws, traditions, and divine expectations, not because they made life easier, but because they made existence meaningful. The gods did not promise comfort, they promised continuity. If floods would come or they wouldn't, rain would fall or it wouldn't. Disease would strike without warning. Death was familiar, visible, woven into daily life, and yet people endured not because life was gentle, but because it had structure, a place within a cosmic order. In these societies, safety was temporary, wealth was fragile, power shifted constantly, but meaning was everything. Meaning gave purpose to labor, justification to suffering, and direction to sacrifice. Modern life trains us to expect comfort as a baseline: clean water, shelter, medicine, leisure. Ancient life trained people to endure discomfort without questioning its purpose. Hardship was not failure, it was proof that the world was working as it always had. And through that endurance, civilizations were built, pyramids rose from sand, cities aligned with stars, roads, temples, calendars, myths, all shaped by people who did not expect ease, but accepted struggle as the cost of belonging to something larger than themselves. Survival was never the goal, endurance was, and endurance, more than comfort, is what shaped history. Why you would fail, so why wouldn't you last a single day? Not because you are weak, not because you lack intelligence or courage. You would fail because you expect things ancient people never had. You expect clean water that doesn't need boiling, filtering, or prayer. You expect food to be available every day. not dependent on floods, seasons, or divine favor. You expect medicine that works without spells, antibiotics instead of hope, and pain relief that doesn't involve enduring it in silence. You expect personal freedom, the right to complain, to rest, to choose a different path. Ancient life offered none of that in the ancient world. Survival required submission, a submission to heat that could kill you by noon, a submission to hunger that returned every season, a submission to hierarchy, where gods ruled through kings, and kings ruled through fear. A submission to forces you could not negotiate with, only appease. Survival was never individual. If you didn't work, you didn't eat. If you fell behind, your family suffered. If the harvest failed, everyone paid the price together. Your identity was not you, it was your village, your household, your role. And ancient people were tougher than us, not because they were stronger in some heroic sense, but because they had no alternative. There was no escape and no safety net, no illusion that life would be fair. They adapted because they had to. They endured because endurance was the only option available. You wouldn't fail because you're incapable. You would fail because the world you were built for no longer exists, and the world that existed then demanded everything: your body, your obedience, your belief, just to let you survive one more day. The quiet truth: ancient civilizations were not romantic worlds frozen in golden sunlight. They were harsh, demanding systems held together by belief, ritual, and constant effort. Are beautiful in their achievements, yes, but fragile beneath the surface. Always one failed harvest or broken balance away from collapse. Every monument we admire today was built on exhaustion, a stone lifted by hands that would never tuck its comfort. Every ritual was rooted in fear, not fear of punishment alone, but fear of chaos, drought, darkness, and divine abandonment. Every day survived required sacrifice, whether of time, body, freedom, or belief. And yet, these civilizations endured not for decades, but for centuries, sometimes for millennia. Longer than most modern nations ever will. They endured not because life was gentle or just, not because people were happier, but because meaning was shared. People believed their suffering mattered, that their labor upheld the sun, the river, the balance of the world itself, that endurance was not failure, but participation in something greater than the self. Modern life teaches us to seek comfort. Ancient life taught people to accept hardship and to give it purpose. And perhaps that is the quiet truth beneath the ruins and relics. Not that ancient people lived better lives, but that they understood something we often forget, that survival alone is not enough. Meaning is what carries a civilization forward, even when comfort never arrives. A night of perspective, as the fire crackles softly and the world around you slows. Take a moment to remember this: you live in a time of comfort that would have been unimaginable to nearly every human who came before you. Clean water, quiet nights, medicine, warmth, and choice, things so ordinary now that we rarely notice them were once rare miracles earned through endurance. The past was not kinder, it was harsher, more fragile, and far less forgiving. But it was also honest. Every day demanded effort. Every life required resilience. People rose with the sun not because they wanted to, but because survival allowed no pause. And yet, they endured not through ease, but through meaning, ritual, and shared belief. At night, let these ancient lives remind you not of suffering, but of strength, not of fear, but of persistence, of humanity's quiet ability to continue even when comfort was absent and certainty was rare. As you close your eyes, know this: the calm you feel now rests on the shoulders of countless generations who carried the weight of the impossible so that life could move forward. Sleep well. History has carried you this far.